If you want a fast and easy way to understand the different parts of the Federal Acquisition Regulations, also known as the FAR, then you must watch this video. Let's dive into it. The FAR is often thought to be this big, scary word used in the government contract arena. It has an excessive amount of regulatory language, often difficult to understand, and even harder to know where to find specific information. When I started in government contracts, the FAR was newly online, and although we had PDF versions, they were not searchable. So I spent many hours reading page by page to absorb the information. At the end of this video, I promise you will be more at ease with the FAR and be empowered to seek and find information faster and more easily than before. At a very high level, the FAR is a set of overarching rules and guidelines designed to create uniform policies for federal acquisitions. It's broken out by subchapter, part, subpart, section, and subsection, and uses the number format below. Each subchapter and part is organized with intention. They cover specific areas of the acquisition process and are the rules and guidelines required within the FAR provision and clauses, often referred to as FAR Part 52. We will talk about FAR 52 later in this video. I also have a FAR Part series playlist on this channel that could be helpful, and I'll include the link in the description of this video. Let's quickly go through each of the subchapters. A, General, highlights the foundational items of the FAR. B, Acquisition Planning, identifies the various steps required by the government before they can even solicit an opportunity. C, Contract Methods and Types, breaks down the various acquisition options. D, Socioeconomic Programs, speaks to small and foreign businesses, social impact topics like environment, labor laws, and Freedom of Information Act, which is FOIA. Then E, General Contract Requirements, speaks to finances, patents, data rights, insurance, taxes, and disputes, and protests, and so many other things. F, Special Categories of Contracting, focuses on more in-depth areas of contracting like research and development, construction, services, major systems like weapons, and etc. G, Contract Management, focuses on various operational areas like audits, modifications, subcontracting, quality, transportation, government property. If you have departments in your company that align with these specific areas, I would highly encourage the functional leaders of those areas to fully understand the part applicable to their department. It could be the difference between compliance and non-compliance and profit or loss. Finally, H, Clauses and Forms, spells out the pre-award provisions and post-award clauses that all parties are required to adhere to, both the government and you as the contractor, and even your subcontractors. This part is unique to the others where the provisions and clauses will reference or align with the previous parts in other subchapters. I will talk more about this in a few minutes. Now let's talk about the number system for the FAR. In this example, we are using 47.303-1. I've included some pictures from earlier slides to highlight their relationship. As you can see, the FAR part is before the decimal and can be 1 or 2 digits. If you reference the FAR parts matrix from the previous slide, you can see FAR part 47 is transportation. That means that this regulation is about transportation. It's important to note that you will not be expected to know every subpart, section, or subsection like I have highlighted in this picture here. I simply want to show you the relationship between the FAR parts and the numbers. I do, however, encourage you to have a good understanding on at least the FAR parts, numbers, and titles to help you speak to regulatory information in meetings, negotiations, or other conversations that should arise. For example, if you're on a conference call or put on a spot in a meeting about a transportation regulation or requirement, you can simply say, I'll need to reference the contract and confirm what's in FAR 47 before I circle back to you in writing either way. See, you do not necessarily need to know the language in the weeds, but you can speak to it appropriately to the group and then validate after. It's a win-win. Let's see another example. Here we have 25.602-2. As you can see, similar to previous examples, the digits left of the decimal are the part, and our matrix identifies FAR Part 25 as foreign acquisitions. That means that this regulation is about foreign acquisitions. So now that you understand the FAR parts and the relationship with them, let's skip to FAR Part 52, Provisions and Clause, to add a little level of complexity. Earlier I mentioned FAR Part 52 was unique because the provisions and clauses in that part relate to or align with other FAR parts. FAR Part 1 through 51 are regulations and are not necessarily included in the solicitations or contracts. They are the rules and guidelines that establish the provisions and clauses. Essentially, provisions and clauses are the terms and conditions you would see in a normal contract between two companies. So let's look at some FAR Part 52 provisions or clauses which relate to some of our same topics used in our previous examples. In this example, the number 52 is the FAR part left of the decimal. So now you know this is either a solicitation provision or a contract clause. Then the subpart, the 2 after the decimal, specifically says that it is the text of provisions and clauses. So everything with 52.2 is simply provisions or clauses in written form. Now remember, FAR 52 is unique to where it aligns or references other FAR parts, which are FAR Part 1 through 51. Given that, this example, 52.247, are clauses for transportation. Is that an aha moment or what? Let's look at another example of FAR Part 52. Here, we use 52.225. Now, as in the previous example, subpart 52.2 is simply the text of provisions or clauses for the section identified by the next two numbers, 25. So 52.225 is provisions or clauses for foreign acquisitions. That is relationship between FAR parts and the FAR clauses. And that was the gist of what we were talking about today. You know, the FAR is a huge piece of regulatory information. In fact, there are over 800 different provisions and clauses just in FAR Part 52. If you focus on the FAR part numbers and titles outlined here and the FAR Part 52 provisions and clauses, you will eventually get to a point where it's second nature for you to know what is and is not required or what you need to take exception to. So now that you understand FAR numbers, let's talk about the why. Why does my company have to follow that clause? Welcome to prescriptions. No, not the pharmacy kind. The prescribed reason why a provision or clause is included into a solicitation as a provision or in as a contract as a clause. Each provision or clause in subpart 52.2 has introductory text. That text cross-references to the prescribed FAR part related to the subject of the provision or clause and explains why it must be included. Introductory text is located right below the provision title and number and states as prescribed, which you can see highlighted in yellow. So using previous examples, FAR Clause 52.247-29 here, FOB origin, specifically states in the opening, as prescribed in 47.303-1C, insert the following clause. If you go to the cross-reference 47.303-1C, which is usually linked directly to the government clause page, and go to the specific cross-referenced line, which is C, you will see the prescription says, the contracting officer shall insert in solicitation and contracts the clause at 52.247-29 FOB origin when the delivery term is FOB origin. The prescription is the why. Now, if your solicitation or contract is not FOB origin, you will take exception to that before award when you submit your proposal. Now that you know how to find things in the FAR, I encourage you to check out the FAR playlist on my channel, where I outline each FAR part to help you deep dive into the FAR in a more simplistic way. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to teach you more.